All right, guys. Welcome to the Culture Reset. Where we're exploring all things Web3 together. And today our first guest on the episode is Ahaan Raizada.
Hi guys,
Great
nice to
stuff.
be with you all.
So, quickly to introduce our honorable guest, um, Ahan is a law student currently in Pune, studying in his fourth year, and has, like most of us, gotten into crypto out of just pure interest. And hopefully today, gives us a lot of insight into not only the aspects of crypto in relation to the black box that is regulation, especially in
Mhm.
India, but also his personal views on the space and how he is personally navigating it, because
Mhm.
it's very dynamic, it's very fluid, and a lot of people take the side of not doing anything rather than doing something. But we're here because we want to do something about it.
Mhm.
So with that, why don't you, Ahan, also personally introduce yourself and tell us how you got into crypto and where you're at right now.
Sure. Thanks again, guys, for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you all. So basically, my crypto journey starts in 2017. So that's when I started reading up about blockchain and Bitcoin, and I was just like reading basic stuff. Wasn't too deep into it or anything. I invested a small sum of money back then as well. I'd borrowed some money from my mom, and that obviously worked quite well at that point. And I had no idea of what it was going to be like, obviously. So I mean, kind of forgot about it for 3-4 years. Then at the start of this year, 2021 was, I think, quite a landmark year for crypto in general. So at the start of this year, around Feb March, the Indian government, there was a lot of speculation about them coming out with a bill. It's still there, but even at that point, they're going to come out with a bill, ban crypto. So around that point, along with that news and the fact that the market was running up so high, obviously everyone wants to get in on the price action. So that obviously drew me in. But once I came into the space, I realized there's actually so much more to uh, it than what meets the eye. And ever since, I've been deeply fascinated by this space, its implications on society, on our culture reset, like you guys have named your own show, or economics, or regulation, and how we all have to adapt to this inevitable change, in my opinion. And into that effect, I also started my own blog called Blockchain. So you spell blockchain with BLOCK, so I just added law in it, so BLAWOCK chain. So I wanted to write about things from a legal, tech and crypto's perspective on it, and cover events that are happening, like legally speaking and otherwise, and just provide another viewpoint into this industry, because I feel like this industry is quite multifaceted. There's a space for every person here, whether it's analysts, whether it's developers, obviously, I mean, they're the backbone, whether it's marketeers, whether it's salespeople, whether it's lawyers, like me, or future lawyers, whatever. There's always a space for everyone. So that was my idea, and the way I was looking at it, and that's basically a little bit about how I got in the space and where I am right now.
Right. So just to dive a bit deeper into your
Mhm.
personal background. So you're a law student, and obviously your blog is at the intersection of law and crypto.
Mhm.
So just a little bit about what the current state, obviously in India, because I mean, I'm sure that is what you have the pulse upon, but also if the state abroad. It doesn't have to be
Sure.
too in depth, but just to give us perspective as to where we are in India compared to elsewhere. So yeah, so I mean, because I'm sure, and Ahan, please feel free to jump in, because if I'm wrong, but I am pretty unaware of the regulation where we are. I mean, I know very broadly that India is not the the most progressive when it comes to crypto as
Mhm.
countries like El Salvador or other places. So yeah, if you could just demystify this whole area, would be great.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a good question, and I think it's an important one. because I think it's important for the average person to have some idea about the regulatory landscape in crypto, because at the end of the day it affects, obviously, from a retail perspective, because like, should you invest, should you not? A lot of people are apprehensive, a lot of people have this doubt that they think that it's illegal, and like, you can't invest in it, and like the government has banned it. So current status, like basically in India, crypto is not illegal. So there was a judgment that came out in March of 2020, which is right when the lockdown was like, about to be announced. So right before that or around that time, Supreme Court of India had struck down a circular issued by the Reserve Bank of India. Reserve Bank had basically banned banks from dealing and transacting in virtual currencies through a notification it had issued. And the Supreme Court held that it is unconstitutional for the Reserve Bank to do so, and it violates the right of crypto exchanges to conduct their business. So that's under Article 19, which is one of our fundamental rights to like freedom of trade and occupation and conducting a business of your choice, essentially. So that's basically in a summary what had happened. So ever since it held that the RBI also has the like it has the authority to regulate crypto, but or at least like crypto as a currency, because there are many dimensions to how you approach crypto, and it can get pretty complex. But long story short, uh, crypto is legal by virtue of the Supreme Court judgment. That is the highest standing law in the land right now. There's no bill that has been passed in parliament. There have been rumors. I'm sure you guys might be aware of the fact that India has been wanting to at least introduce some bill to regulate it. Now that bill, on the face of at least the one that was the draft version that was released in 2019, and we've not seen the draft version of the latest anticipated bill, but that one wanted to completely ban all uh, cryptocurrencies and all private currencies as well. That was the wording, and only allow the Reserve Bank of India to basically issue their own digital currency and promote some underlying use case of like not ban blockchain technology, but ban mostly all cryptocurrencies. That doesn't make much sense from a regulatory perspective, and obviously our regulators to understand that, like none of them have grown up understanding this. It's not like it was taught in school. They are also, it's a pretty steep learning curve for anybody that is not that tech savvy, or it just hasn't sort of delved into it in some capacity. So I think on that front, the biggest challenge is obviously education. But yeah, that was the status of that bill that was supposed to be introduced, but it has constantly been delayed because our regulators and our policymakers have realized that you cannot ban it. Like there's no chance you can ban it, because then it's just too good an opportunity to pass on, and like you have a lot bigger and upside in terms of economic benefits, job creation, like really getting in, attracting some really promising foreign investment, and just supporting an entire ecosystem, and like making India one of the leaders in this space. It's a huge opportunity. India has some of the most talented developers in the world, and a large pool of developers, so to say. I'm sure, I think our regulators and policymakers realize that, and hence they have been constant, like in this latest winter session, which was in November, December. They were supposed to release and pass the bill, but again they've deferred it. So that just, I think, shows the fact that they want to at least wait. Like it's better to delay it than to come up with something that is detrimental to the space, because
Well,
then you go into litigation again, you file cases, you waste public time and money. Rather you take your time, come up with something that is at least it's good as a first draft or a first rendition, and is not problematic, and then take it forward from there. So I think that's the situation in India. Having said that, we have, like crypto unicorns in India: Polygon, Coin BCX, Coin Switch. They've attracted record investment. Coin Switch has actually attracted investment from A16Z and Andreessen Horowitz, and they're a unicorn right now. And like I said, we have some of the most talented developers, and like there are so many crypto startups that are coming out in various fields. So I think that there's just no way that is going to be banned. It's just about how um, prudently do they regulate, because we have a lot of other countries to look up to who have done some actually really good work in terms of setting up like the regulations and the legislative work, they're far ahead of us. So like you said, you mentioned El Salvador is obviously a smaller country, and their legislation itself is not that impressive. The step to decide to take such a big policy changes, but the the regulation itself is not
Mm.
that thought out or detailed or processed, as opposed to other, let's say, developed jurisdictions like the United States or the European Union and countries therein, especially countries like Switzerland, especially countries like Liechtenstein now, Malta, even Germany. These countries have some promising bodies of legislation which actually support and help
Mm.
the ecosystem grow. Singapore or the United Arab Emirates is doing exceptionally well. I was just reading, the I was going through Bahrain's legislation today on the regulation of crypto asset service providers, and that was really impressive because very quite well thought and well covered from what I thought. And again, there are many other countries as well that are working to, I mean, most countries I think at this point are working towards developing a facilitative framework and seeing how best one can actually regulate this space. So yeah, that's how I would say what's going on in India and briefly the world.
Mm. Mm.
Just to add on to that, from India having like an abundance of human capital and like number of people, willing to participate, develop, and be a part of the ecosystem, where do you think India as a government should take sort of inspiration from in drafting a crypto bill, or do you think it should take it from multiple countries, or
Mhm.
how do you think? What are your thoughts on how they should structure it?
Sure, sure. So, I mean, that's a really good question. And, I obviously don't have the perfect answer, but what I can say in my opinion is they should definitely look at, like the jurisdictions I mentioned, or especially like the European jurisdictions. They should look at Singapore. They should definitely look at what UAE is doing, and, study the way they've come up with their legislations, and try to, address the pain points in the industry, right? Like, what are your, as a legislator, what are your biggest concerns? Like, some of the biggest concerns, obviously, because mostly crypto is like, apart from developers that actually use these currencies, as for example for gas and developing dapps and stuff like that, most people want to come into the market to invest it, right? Like, you then, from an investment perspective, that makes it similar. If it's obviously not tantamount to securities, but it makes it similar to your securities, like shares and
Mm.
stocks. So just in the investment sense, so then you should definitely look at it and study how countries have approached it from that perspective, and focus on, like, for example, investor protection laws, because that's important for from a very everyday point of view. I was just reading, like I said, I mentioned Bahrain, so I was impressed because I've seen a couple of legislations here and there. I've not seen any one legislation or body that specifically addresses how you should handle and, like, protect consumer interests and investor protection. That's an important area. The SEC in the US is quite big on investor protection, is why they have sort of in many actions they have taken against several players, have said that you can't be what you're offering are unregistered securities, and you can't be doing that because that's against investor protection, and obviously you're bypassing securities laws. So again, basically, to answer your question, India should definitely look at, the countries where legislation exists. So there does exist legislation in the US. I wouldn't say the US is the most advanced in its approach. It's obviously, it has a very large ecosystem of players. There's an entire crypto lobby group also in the US, which is very well funded now, and legislations are still coming up through there. So another similarity to look at, US as a good jurisdiction for our purposes, is because US has a lot of sectoral regulators. So they have the CFTC, the commodities regulator. They have the SEC, which is like a securities market regulator. They have the IRS, which looks at taxation. So each of these bodies, they have the OCC, which is the comptroller of currency. So you can say the India as the RBI, which is, looking after fiscal and monetary matters, similar to the OCC. The SEBI is similar to the SEC. Then you have other, these are the two main regulators I can think of. Then obviously you have insurance regulators as well. So the FDIC in the USA is similar to the IRDAI in India. So if you look at the fact that you have US and India sort of have that parallel in terms of like multiplicity of regulators with overlapping jurisdictions. That's a good model at least to see what they're doing, if not adopt it, like just exactly like like a copy, because you can't. It has to be unique to your own situation and circumstances and stuff like that. So yeah, it's good to look at US from that perspective. It's good to look at the European Union, especially because they came up with a marketing crypto assets regulation, which and a newer rendition of that, which is so I've not read too much into that, but I've heard that it's a step above from its previous rendition. Oh yeah, another thing which slipped my mind, but it's coming back now, is another big concern, and this is like probably the most pressing concern I think at least mainstream media has, is the money laundering and terrorist financing aspects of cryptocurrency, and how you use that to, for example, be like because the pseudonymous wallets are pseudonymous. Technically, you can track them on like the block explorer and stuff like that. And it's really easy to see how each transaction is logged. But nonetheless, there are definitely avenues to launder money and use it for terrorist financing. Like every technology comes with pros and cons. I mean, you can use it for a good or a bad. Crypto and blockchain is no different. Like it's depends on the person and the utility. It's always so that's a huge concern. In that regard, India should really look at. So there is the FATF, which is the Financial Action Task Force. It's sort of like, you can say, like the global watchdog for money laundering regulations. And what they do is they've just come out in October with their recent guidance on like how to handle like basically crypto, and like how should virtual asset service providers and virtual assets be regulated. There was a note on DeFi and NFTs as well. It's not very technically clear, I would say. I mean, it's a step, it's a good step, it's a good step in the right direction. But of course, that, like, you again, the regulators have not fully cracked the code, because this industry evolves day by day. But again, to take inspiration and really look at, like, go through that entire 115-page document and understand what the broad guidance is, would be a very helpful step for India to implement. Like SEBI already, like has like every securities market has anti-money laundering provisions in place, mostly modeled after the Financial Action Task Force's basically like template, you could say. So I mean, most of that is also applicable to crypto. What I would say should be included in the regulation specifically is to appoint blockchain analytics companies that help track and identify bad actors or flag suspicious transactions, because suspicious transactions is basically defined in FATF regulations, and it is those transactions which are basically fishy, or like that. Just guys, 1 second. Yeah, so like I was saying, that basically I think it's wise to include the mandation, like basically how you have under, like any company that is registered in India has to, by the mandate of the company's law, appoint auditors to audit their financial statements and company balance sheet and vagera vagera at the end of every financial year. It's just a mandate by law to keep company compliance in check. Similarly, on those lines, obviously it's not the same concept, but the fact that as auditors are mandated under the Companies Act, I would say it block like having the appointment of blockchain analytics companies. There are quite a few. There's Chainalysis, there's CoreChain, and there are a couple of other very promising players that actually have, and TRM Labs as well, which is based in the USA. They have very promising anti-money laundering tracking and security and KYC softwares and provisions in place that have helped a lot of a lot of companies have tied up with them, and with their help they're able to, for example, track, because in the crypto world we also hear of so many hacks, Poly network got hacked for $600 million and the hacker returned it back. That's another story. But then, there's some players sometimes, I mean, you can't directly track it, but these companies have been able to identify, the actors behind the pseudonymous screens, so to say. So I think that's a really important thing India should definitely consider and work towards. And if that's done, I think a lot of the main apprehensions of common people, get quelled down, and then you don't have like our media sort of hyping up over, it's used in just scams and just, it's only meant for all of this. That impression is there. It's perpetrated a large part by the media as well, but also because, to be fair, there are those applications and use cases that have been like carried out by cryptocurrencies, especially privacy coins like Monero and Zcash, because they completely obfuscate your transaction details, and that is obviously a matter of concern. So yeah, I think India can look at these countries and this approach, especially relevant to its context at this moment in time.
Yeah. I mean, I think Ahan, what you highlighted a few points here. I think at the core of it, it's a lack of, obviously a lack of um, support by the government, but at the same time, it's a lack of, um, let's say, I don't want to say misleading, but it's almost capitalization of this new technology by the media to drive, the usual the suspects. They're trying to drive traffic, drive eyeballs to their respective news sources, and really taking advantage of the misinformation or lack of information in this industry, which gets at the lack of education that is there amongst people. Anyway, India is let's say developing nation. If you look at the population as a whole in terms of financial literacy, and this wave of crypto is, I mean, it's opportune in the sense it's come when it's come, but it's also inopportune that we don't have even like half the country with a brokerage account. But I think the efforts like this podcast, you being here, I think it's one step, and part of the effort of education, trying to educate the people to avoid falling for the hype and whatnot.
Yeah.
So my question is, now that you've stated where the regulation is, you also, you've highlighted how India could even take the next steps towards regulation. But the fact remains, today it's not here, right? And users are not going to, when I say users, I mean people like you and me who want to get exposure to the industry, who want to learn, who want to, people who want to make this their career. They cannot wait for regulation. They have to act in the environment that is there today, right? So how do you think one should do it? How do you think that one should take action, but at the same time stay on the good side of regulation? Now this may be, now I mean, the usual concerns, could be tax. That is a very usual, like what will happen in terms of the tax implications. But it could also be worrisome about just being on the legal side of things. You want to commit a crime by doing some action in this ecosystem. It could be anything. So yeah, so how does one take advantage of this opportunity, but at the same time or ensure to the best of their ability to not fall on the wrong side of the law at some arbitrary point in the future?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So definitely in terms of tax, I won't be able to tell you like the entire implication, because tax in itself is a very complicated and extremely broad topic. You have so many experts in tax law itself. You have chartered accountants who do this for bread and butter. So personally, I don't know that much about the tax implications, but I definitely know that it's important to, like, for example, you're using a centralized exchange like CoinDCX, or you're using WazirX. Every buy or sell transaction you do has to be recorded for income tax purposes. You will have to declare basically the profits and the gains that you make on these investments, which head that may come under, whether it comes under capital gains tax, or it comes under some other head of income for the purposes of income tax. I'm not the right person to say, but I definitely know one basic thing people can do to avoid any scrutiny from the taxman is to keep a very solid record of every single transaction you do. And like, it's very hard to do that, right? Like, I've struggled with that myself. I was trying to go through and extract the data of because I've used I've used CoinDCX, I've used Binance, I've used WazirX, I've used CoinSwitch,
Yeah.
I've opened an account in Volt. I think that's far too many. I would suggest people stick to only one or two for just tracking purpose ease. But yeah, the point is, when I try to actually get down to seeing each and every transaction that I've done over the past year, it was a big hassle, because each now if you actually go to, and that's a good exercise to do, to realize which exchange is the most convenient to use to extract data. Now, that was a separate point, but at the end of it, to really get down to having that in a solid place, and being in, being in a readable format, and clearly seeing the price at which you bought, the value appreciated over time, and then being able to discern the difference, it becomes challenging. So I think one key basic takeaway is, track every single transaction you enter into, whether you're a trader, whether you're an investor, whether you're just trying to understand how it works and investing a small amount of money. Just do that. That's the first place to start. Another important thing that I would say right now, and again, this is not financial, legal, investment advice, but it's just something I would do myself. So I'm just saying what I would do is, I would
Right.
not send crypto to anybody abroad, because then you would attract FEMA provisions, which is the Foreign Exchange Management Act, and technically there's no clarity around how it works. It gets quite hairy, so just best to avoid it. Don't try to send crypto to somebody or your friend in the US, or try to send them crypto so they buy you something and get it back. Just don't do that. Rather, once they're here, you might just transfer them money or whatever, however your unique circumstances. Don't do that, because it's just easier to avoid any legal confusion. I wouldn't say necessarily trouble, but definitely it could be a lot of confusion and hassle if you do that. um, Thirdly, it's important again, um, advertisements and consumer protection. A lot of crypto companies, and especially during the World Cup recently, in the 2020 World Cups, a lot of ads were out. I don't recount the exact companies, but a lot of them were saying that, you invest with us, we'll give you a guaranteed beat FD return 16%, or
Hmm.
uh, invest in crypto, aapka future sahi hai, this is the future, go all in, whatever. They didn't say go all in,
Yeah.
but implying that, invest in
Imply.
crypto,
Yeah.
is that crypto
Yeah.
is it, like to the moon, whatever the hell. But the point is, uh, that is, I think, unethical. It's wrong, because it's easy for anybody, because obviously we've seen crazy returns in crypto, so it's not unbelievable to think of and be lured in by the promise of stellar
Yeah.
returns. But at the same time, I don't think that it's right for anybody to just jump into the market based on somebody else's recommendation, based on an advertisement,
Hmm.
based on just the hype that is very prevalent in this market. I would say, if you really want to, obviously start off with just putting a small sum of money to see how it works, but then do your own research. Always, that's always the best thing to do your own research. Know what Bitcoin, start with Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin? Why is it important? How did it come about? What is the, I'll try to, I mean, obviously no, everyone doesn't have so much time, but try to understand obviously what the technology underlying crypto is, and why that's so important, and how it relates to crypto. And then try to get into the market slowly, track prices, but always do your own research. Don't just go all in and be fooled by popular narrative or advertisements, and a third person or a third source telling you what is or what isn't. Try to make your own informed decision, so that you're always on, at least not then you don't have those days, because this market is volatile inherently. Like, you can see drawdowns of 50% in a day, and unless you have the gall to digest that and know what you're into, it's going to be quite traumatic for you. So to avoid any of that, I would just say, do your own research. So yeah, this is broadly how I would tell people to be on the right side of not just legal things, but also practically how you can just go about entering the space, and why it's important for one to do that. Because at the end of the day, the market is not running anywhere. The market will be here before, it was here before us, and it will be here after us. So just take your time, and try to understand what you're doing, instead of just jumping into it first.
and and that I completely understand that, and I completely agree with you. Like, people should start with doing their own research, and basically, like, I also, the same way my journey started was like by reading the Bitcoin Standard. That's how I was like exposed to crypto, and that's and you go down that rabbit hole and just like never ending. But so on that, based on that, now where do you see when it comes to India, where do you see cryptocurrencies or blockchain technology over the next 5-10 years? Like, crypto is obviously a product of blockchain,
Mhm.
but so like where do you see both of them sort of being implemented or being used, or how over the next 5 to 10 years? What are your thoughts on that?
Right, that's a great question again. And think, 5 to 10 years is obviously, it's a short time frame now, but in the crypto world it's like like there's a meme, like that interstellar meme where, like, basically, like 4 hours in the crypto world is like 20
Yeah,
years in the real world, something like that. You should
no, I've seen. Yeah.
so, so 5 to 10 years, definitely. I mean, I can't predict exactly where, but basically I think definitely it's an institutional game changing technology. And somebody that, like, I interacted with said that, like, it's going to affect all institutions. So I think the first and most largest institution that is obviously affected is legacy finance. With the rise of DeFi, the biggest challenge is education and getting people to understand how to use DeFi protocols. So that is a steep learning curve, but definitely that disrupts your banking system to quite a large extent, if not completely. Banking, payments, settlements, these are all, and cross border payments as well, they are completely set for an overhaul. It's just a matter of time, how, when and how that happens in each regulatory scenario, but it will, I think, happen. And I mean, it's just, I think human society eventually progresses towards technological efficiency and market efficiency. So it is just like the next step. Like, we didn't have computers before, then we had computers, then we had extremely fast processing MacBooks, now we have quantum computers, so on and so forth. It's just, we will evolve technologically, and it's just obviously going to be a cheaper, more efficient, transparent, immutable, and secure technology. So it doesn't make sense as to why we wouldn't gravitate towards that for the betterment of everyone. So that's a big change I see coming. Another change that I see coming is definitely, like, for example, uh, a more local level and uh, business, not business to business, but small scale businesses, or, like, at a more microcosmic level, blockchain technology will be used. I can give you an example of how it's already being used. In for example, warehouse receipt financing. What happens with warehouses, and there's a company called WHRLL, which is doing this already, and they're doing some great work. What happens in warehouse receipts is, like, farmers basically take their stock of wheat, for example, and they store it in warehouses, and against those deposited bags of wheat, then you get some loan to be able to finance your working capital for your farm, and, like, buy equipment, buy more seeds, whatever you need to do to basically do your business of farming, right? Now the problem with that is, a lot of times, the product itself, like the wheat bag, used to be replaced by the warehouse owners, because they're a central custodian. So you don't really know how they're going to handle it if there's no sort of way to keep a check on that, right? And secondly, farmers used to use that same bag to take loans from two different banks against that same underlying like asset, so to say. That's the double spend problem, essentially.
Yeah.
So that is being solved by Whirl, where now, when you're putting the entire system not just on the blockchain, but integrating it with the Internet of Things, so that you're able to track it real time, because it's not like you can just update the data on the blockchain. If it's not real time, it's quite pointless, because then you can sort of anyways fabricate the data. So even if your data is immutable, it's sort of not, may not be having integrity. So having real time sensors in place, having, like, uh, like basically putting the warehouse receipt on the blockchain, and then taking a loan, using that to take a loan from the bank, it enhances a farmer's access to credit, right? That enables them to get secure credit, that enables the bank to give them more money, because now banks also little wary, because why would I want to risk giving a loan on which I might not get a return? Like, I don't have the incentive to loan it out to farmers. Then now, if banks can give better loans, farmers can get access to larger loans, and that helps everybody in the ecosystem. And Whirl has already tied up with 1400 like, warehouses in Maharashtra. They're planning to go all India now. They might have progressed from the last time that I read about this. So that is, again, like, just a anecdote of what blockchain technology can do. There are so many more applications to it, and like I think there's no end to it, because when you come to decentralization, then disintermediation, that is what the blockchain solves. So now if you're looking at like Akash as a decentralized cloud storage, that's a dApp
Yeah.
on Ethereum,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not wrong. uh,
Hmm.
you're getting cheaper cloud storage, more secure, it's decentralized, it's not a central custodian, you're not being charged the same commission fees, and like it's more secure that way. You don't have to worry about one central point in a system failing, and for the dependency of your cloud and your data being backed up there. Again, I mean, I don't see why people wouldn't shift to that, especially because you're incentivized economically to do so, not just the other benefits that come along with it. So again, that's that. And then now, in terms of the other ways the blockchain ecosystem will explode, like I think there's this entire hype around like the metaverse and stuff like that. And obviously, I think metaverse gaming and these themes are going to pick up quite crazily. We hopefully, because we have, like I said, such a promising and large developer pool. India should do really well. Honestly, like Polygon is Indian, and I'm so proud of like Polygon and its founders, because it's it is, you cannot associate Ethereum without Polygon. All developers are developing on Polygon, and it's great. And I feel like there will be more such, not just restricted to layer 2, but like again, there's so like Web3 is massive, so there's no end to it. Like you can think of multiple applications. So I think the future is really promising. I also think the future is uncertain, because none of us can ever capture the true essence of what and how things will develop, because we'll only be able to also only get a fraction of the entire like way things go, because in this industry especially, things go like they develop on a daily basis at such a fast rate. But yeah, I think the future is really exciting, it's promising, and for India it's bright. And I think regulate, like it's always been the case that regulation plays catch up with technology. You can't it can't be the other way around. So I am positive that regulation will also catch up. So yeah, that's what I think is going to happen in the next few
Right.
years.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the most beautiful aspects of this is that not only is the technology providing superior solutions to the end consumer, but also it provides a positive economic benefit. When you combine the two, very rarely does it not gain mass adoption.
Mhm.
So I mean, I'm sure for all of us, it seems like a no-brainer, right?
Mhm.
And when at the same time you have people, the smart people, not people who've done really well for themselves, not see this, not come to the same conclusion as we do. It's either a case of we're missing something, or it's a case of we have found this opportunity early,
Mhm.
and are might be able to really gain from this information asymmetry. So only time will tell, but I'm sure we are all on the no-brainer side of things. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I mean, Ahan, do you wanna go to the more fun questions now?
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on? So, what are the basket of coins that you are holding or that you would like recommend to invest in?
Sure. Again,
And
I'm gonna.
obviously
And
we can.
obviously, it's not financial advice, but
Yeah,
like
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
just from your
This is
Yeah.
perspective.
purely for
Really.
entertainment purposes.
Yeah, yeah, this has to be said. Like, this is like the standard disclaimer, not financial or investment advice. But what I'm currently holding, like, obviously, Bitcoin, no brainer. Ethereum, no brainer. Other than that, currently, in between, I had to liquidate some of my portfolio, because, like, there was one day where there came news that the government is going to release that bill, and the entire market had crashed in India, especially USDT had fallen from 80 to 62 overnight. So that day I was forced to liquidate some of my positions, because I mean, it's not all my money. I'm managing my mom's money, because she
Yeah.
wanted exposure. So I was like, cool, I'll do it on your behalf. So she said, sell it. So I had no option. But since then, what I'm holding right now is I'm holding Zilica, I'm holding Matic, obviously. I'm holding Sandbox. I'm holding FTM. I'm holding Solana. I'm holding. Oh, what else am I holding? I'm holding a bunch of other coins, just not able to. Yeah,
But
basically
the
Algorand. Yeah, Algorand. Yeah, basically these are like what I'm
yeah.
holding currently.
So what would Bitcoin and Ethereum, what would that make up of your portfolio? Like 50%? Would you say?
Yeah,
Would that be a
yeah,
fair
yeah,
assessment?
easily, more than
Yeah,
50%.
and then the rest would be much small allocations.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right, right.
So my, I mean,
Any, yeah.
no, I was just saying that I think that my strategy is just simple. It's like whatever profits I make, I rotate that back into Bitcoin or Ethereum, and like then let the altcoin. If they run, they run. That's great. If they
Hmm.
don't, then it's not great. But yeah,
So you would definitely say that you're a more very very long term. You're in it for the long game, and
yeah,
you're holding Bitcoin and Ethereum like in traditional sense to retirement. That
yeah,
would
yeah,
that would be.
definitely. Like Bitcoin, especially. Like I'm not selling any of my Bitcoin, so like
So if you could just give us a quick snapshot of your Bitcoin thesis, like very
sure,
briefly, that could be a podcast on its own,
yeah,
and,
that
and
could,
and we would love to do that as well. Give you get your
yeah,
insights on the crypto thesis. But if you
correct.
could just quickly,
Yeah. To be honest, like obviously I'm not as lucid as Michael Saylor or Pomp or any of these guys. I mean, they really know what they're talking about, especially Saylor. Saylor's quite a character to say the least. And
yeah,
even Andreas Antonopoulos, he's been one of the early
yeah,
early figures in the space. I mean, for me, Bitcoin is like, it was the first of its kind. It is been designed in that way. Bitcoin is the first truly peer-to-peer trustless application of the blockchain. Its scarcity speaks for itself. It's been compared to digital gold. Above all, Bitcoin, I think, is just because of the way it's been programmed, because of the way that I would say, like Robert Breedlove puts it, it's inviolable property. Nobody can take it away from you. And at the same time, like it's one of the best forms of property that exist in terms of its transferability across space and time, in terms of its ability to hold its value across time. And you can see Bitcoin's only 13 years old, but you can see it's been the only asset class consistently on average giving around 150% returns per year. And it's been classically a hedge against inflation. And at the same time, like, it's just like, how would I say, it's the first app, like the first true instance of not having to depend on to have anybody else to define what money should be, and neither be robbed of the value of your money uh, through, for
Mhm.
example, like, I like now I'm remembering my mom because I've tried to speak to my mom, and my mom is like, very heavy into finance, so I kind of get destroyed in arguments with her. But she's like, you don't understand how money markets work, and how, like, monetary policy works and stuff like that. And like, central banks are printing money in a systematic way, and there's quantitative easing, and like I'm out of my depth there, can't argue on that. But at the same time, what's apparent, and it's just like, all of us know this, is that, like, central banks around the world, and again, it's worth obviously exploring why is it important to have a central bank, and looking at that argument from, like, a rational perspective. I think that's important to do. But that being said, the fact that if you look at the amount of money being printed and the rate of inflation that is going on, the value of your money is depreciating, like basically every day by, and year on year by at least like 6 to 7%, if not more at the least. And the total money supply in at least the US, and I'm sure most countries, because we all follow the cues of the US, 40% of the total supply has only come in the past year. Now you have to find, now it doesn't have to be Bitcoin, it doesn't have to, you have to find an investment class that beats that level of inflation. Could be you're a really insane trader, doesn't matter what asset class you trade, it, you get those returns. But Bitcoin, just by its nature, by its scarcity, by its extremely clear, like, you're very clear about the Bitcoin halving cycles, its supply, and the way it has, and it's open source, right? Like when you have the upgrade, when you have any change to the network, it's mass consensus. It's not one person deciding that I will change the amount of money supply overnight. You can't do that. And any software upgrade is done by mass consensus. So that is the essence of decentralization. That is the beauty of decentralization. It gives power back to people because we collectively decide. It doesn't matter what I think, it doesn't matter what you think, it matters what the network thinks and the consensus protocol in the network being fulfilled for any change to be made. So I think that on that front, the philosophy is definitely worth considering. And the fact that, again, coming back to like the inflation argument, you think about, for example, like let's say, like I own like a Reliance share. Now tomorrow Reliance, in an unauthorized manner, there are many ways to do this, but just for the sake of oversimplification, decides to issue, let's say, 50% more shares without following due process. It dilutes the value of my shareholding, right? The value of my shares has gone down because now the overall supply has increased. That's essentially what's happening with the money we hold in our banks. Now I might be earning whatever, like I might be earning good money, bad money, whatever the amount I might be earning, doesn't matter, because at the end of the day I'm still being robbed of the value of my money over time. So again, I'm not saying it has to be Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is just that one answer to this problem, and just the way it's come about and what it stands for. I think it's just something that if you really go into it, it's something that strikes and resonates deeply. So yeah, again, like of course, I'm not as lucid as Sailor, and I would recommend everybody listening to this to really go read a couple and hear Michael Saylor speak about this.
Monetary
And
energy.
yeah, yeah, he goes on another level of like just how Bitcoin is the best everything. I'm not that much of a Bitcoin maxi as he is, but yeah, he's definitely worth hearing for sure.
Cool, man. Yeah, I mean, I'm run out of questions from my side. Ahaan, if you have any, please.
Yeah. No,
Please
it's
shoot.
thanks. I'm all good. I just love to get your perspective on all of this and understand how you think about like law and understand how like the law might be structured around crypto in India. So yeah, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast,
Yeah.
man. It was really great having you.
Yeah, no,
And,
pleasure
and
being with you guys.
and we'll definitely get you back here and explore your different opinions on the actual cryptocurrency and the actual projects as
Yeah.
opposed to just the law point of view. That would
Correct.
be great.
Yeah, for sure. No,
Yeah.
like it was a pleasure talking to you guys. I think you guys are doing I love your name, Culture Reset. I think that's quite apt, especially with this. And I think it's important to have more and more conversation about this and just spread it to more people, because the space is for everybody. So, and especially if people understand like things from, at least have a understanding of how the regulations are playing about, it's always great. So I always love having these conversations, and it's always fun to interact and learn. And yeah, I hope to also have you guys on sometime on my podcast as well. And then we can talk about like your holdings and how you guys, because I mean Ahaan himself is an analyst, so I'm sure like he has some micro cap picks that like to the moon picks. Yeah, no, really good talking to you guys.